Hi everyone, this is Ashley the Techie Ellenboss with Skyhouse Herb School and Apothecary, and today I'm going to talk about 3 different types of tension and herbs that are good remedies for them. I'll also be going into some practices for those particular types of tension. So when thinking about tension, we all know different people who hold tension in different ways. We know the people that, hold the tension in their faces. You can kind of see it physically in their faces. We know people that hold it in their neck and shoulders, people that hold tension in their jaws. And we also know how it expresses itself in very different ways. So we'll take a look at these 3 different tension types, and I'll call them the brooding type, the angsty type, and then the hyper-vigilant type. So we'll explore those 3 in our video today. So the first type is the brooding type, and this is the type of person who, they tend to be a little bit more internal in the way that they hold and process tension and stress. This person is, maybe a little bit more prone to depression, but they're also really prone to mood swings. So they'll kind of go up and down, but there's always this sort of attachment that they have to the tension that they carry. And so the remedy for this type of tension, I'm sure there's many, but the one that I see associated most specifically with this is Black Cohosh. And so Black Cohosh, the Latin name is Cimicifuga racemosa. And this is a very classic remedy that's used for tension, especially around the menses. And when there is a lot of fluctuation in the emotional state of a person around different parts of the menstrual cycle. So this plant does have a phytoestrogenic component to it. So it does have an effect on hormones and hormone modulation. But beyond that, it's also just a really good antispasmodic, which means it relaxes tension. It releases tension in the body. The tension for the Black Cohosh type, or this sort of broody type, tends to be in the trapezius muscles. So these are the muscles that run sort of down the back of the neck on either side into the shoulder. So if somebody tends to carry a lot of their tension in these muscles and they have this temperament type, then Black Cohosh would be a really good remedy. This is also a good remedy for people that have a history of trauma or abuse. And this could be from childhood, it could be in adulthood, where something has happened that maybe has, where a person has kind of gotten stuck in a mental state. And this is then resulting in different types of tension and psychological tension as well. You'll also see that one of the benefits of Black Cohosh, as well as being an antispasmodic, is it also has an effect on the 5-HT receptors in the hypothalamus. So this is sort of how the how selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, or antidepressants work. Is they slow down the reuptake of serotonin in the brain. And so Black Cohosh actually has been shown in clinical studies to have a similar effect. So it is a mood lifter. And so for that dark, moody, broody type, this is going to give them a little bit of a upswing and a boost of serotonin, which will help them feel better and get out of those deep ruts. Now, another thing that's really interesting about this plant is that one of its other names is black snake root. And that's something that's always struck me, because one of the things about this personality type is that they're all wound up. And it's really often in very kind of underworld type thoughts and desires and fears, things that are really below the surface and, harder to bring to the light. And so black snake root, and if you've ever seen the root, it looks like a bunch of black snakes sort of coiled up together. And so it has this, this very tense, tight type of look to it in its root system. And so all of those things together, I think, really speak to the tension type that Black Cohosh can really help. Matthew Wood also talks about some of the tension being very windy in nature, which means it's changeable. And just like the moods can be very changeable for this tension type, so can pain. It'll almost kind of float and travel throughout the body. And so if that's something that is a part of the pattern that either you or a client maybe you're thinking of has, then Black Cohosh would be a really nice remedy. I would start with fresh root tincture because the fresh root is by far the best medicine. It gives it, even though it has this sort of acrid and kind of caustic taste to it, when you use the fresh root, you get a little sweetness, which is really, really nice. And I also would recommend starting with a low dose. So you could start with like about 5 drops. And then if you're feeling like you want to work with it a little bit deeper, you can go up to, you know, maybe like 15 drops or 20 drops and repeat that several times throughout the day. You know, really to work with these plants, it's best to take them throughout the day. So I would say 2 times the minimum and ideally around 4 times a day, you would take these drops and just let yourself be with the medicine and let it take you underneath, let it take you into the underworld and help show you where maybe the roots of your tension are. You know, what is the cause of the tension? And it might be something that you've suppressed, you haven't really let yourself go into. And Black Cohosh can start to untangle those roots and help you to see what is there and what can be moved and cleared. Then a ritual that would be a really nice one to pair with this medicine would be some movement. And so I would recommend, because Black Cohosh, I think of its medicine, it teaches us to untangle these roots, to do something where we are actually laying on the ground and untangling some of the tensions and things we hold in the physical body. This plant, Matthew Wood also talks about being attributed and has an affinity for the cerebrospinal fluid. So for the ritual practice, just lie on the floor, put on your favorite moody, broody music, or just a music that really brings you into yourself, into your body, into your mind, maybe into your heart, but just something that really is, you know, something that really hits you, right? And then lay down on the floor and let yourself start moving. And I would recommend doing twisting motions and sweeping motions. And again, this idea of what can you do to move out tension, unravel and untwist. And then after you do that work, just let yourself lay there for a little while and take some deep breaths and just see what comes up. You might be surprised as to what is surfaced through loosening the tension in the body. So that is our first tension type and our first remedy. The second one is the angsty tension, and this is the Agrimony type. This is the person who their tension is very much in their head, in their jaw, in their face. And Matthew Wood talks about this as being a remedy for people who are torturedly cheerful. It's almost like they're so happy, you're like, something's not right. You know, like you shouldn't be that happy all the time, or you look like you might be hiding something. And so that's really this Agrimony type, is there's just sort of this sort of wound up, but it's not necessarily authentic. And this is a really good one for also migraines, people who get migraines where their tension shows up, where the migraines sort of start in the shoulder blade. So it kind of is a little bit like that Black Cohosh trapezius thing, but the headache starts here, it travels up the back and sides of the neck. It comes across the front of the head and then travels down into the temples. And, you know, in the diagnostic techniques taught by Margie Flint, she talks about this being related to the gallbladder and the gallbladder meridian. And so this is something that Agrimony works on very nicely, is relieving tension and that particular type of headache. It's also for the person who's very innerly tormented. You know, there's something, you know, it could also be a past trauma, but there's something that they feel sort of tormented from the inside, and they're really having a hard time facing it. But different than the Black Cohosh type, because they're not in a more depressed, broody state. Again, it's more of that sort of up, like wound up in the head and in the face type of state. This type of person also can attract negative people into their lives or negative situations. It's like, you know, the person that just seems like, you know, how do you get yourself into these situations might be the Agrimony type. you can think about maybe that they would attract what we call energy vampires in the new age world, I guess, but people that kind of draw from you and they don't give much back. And so that can create even more tension for the agrimony or the angsty person, because they feel like they're constantly giving, it's never enough, and they're really not getting anything back in return. So let's talk about agrimony. So agrimony is a plant that grows sort of near roadsides and hedges and open spaces. It has very, very serrated leaves, so the edges are very sharp and pointy, and Matthew Wood talks about it sort of looking like a cat whose hair is standing up on their back. And that's sort of the type of tension this person has. It's like everything's sort of rigid and lifted, sort of like they're having a bad hair day, and everything is just sort of frazzled out from their head outward. And agrimony is a wonderful antispasmodic, so it really reduces tension. It also is a bronchodilator and vasodilator, which is interesting because one of the indications for the agrimony type is a person, when they get stressed or anxious or tense, they hold their breath. And so you might be holding your breath now and you're like, oh, wait, I'm doing that. So if you catch yourself holding your breath, or when challenging things happen, you hold your breath, then agrimony as a bronchodilator and a vasorelaxant, it will just sort of help open that up so you're not as prone to clenching. And that's the same pattern with the jaw. There's this clenching. So agrimony helps with that clenching type of pattern. And I would also use a fresh herbal tincture, or fresh sort of aerial parts, that's the above ground parts, for a tincture of agrimony. It's a little harder to find, but it is out there, so you'll just have to search a little harder for this tincture. And you can start also with about 5 drops, and you can increase to maybe about 15, 20 drops, and ideally that would be about 4 times a day. Now, for the ritual for this plant, agrimony, it teaches us how we wear masks, how we have these different facades that we put on that protect us. Ultimately, they protect us from the inner turmoil, or protect us from maybe outward judgment that we're really feeling too fragile to handle. So when you work with agrimony, it can just really help you to relax the facade and to sort of strip away the masks, so that you can start to get down to how are you really feeling, and what do you actually have to give. Maybe you're just giving too much, and that's not it's not really supporting you and giving you back what you need. So an activity or a ritual that would be really nice for the agrimony type would be to stand in front of a mirror and make faces. So this idea of the mask. So, make sort of an over the top happy face, and over the top sad face, and over the top angry face, and especially the emotions that you have a hard time expressing. Let yourself go wild and really show, you let your face feel what it's like to have a broad range of emotional experiences. And you'll find, especially if you hold tension in the jaw and you have like TMJ, that a lot of these things will force you to open up your mouth and express through relaxing the jaw. So that would be a really great activity. And even a jaw massage. So if you can just, put some maybe, jojoba or some nice massage oil on your hands, and just take some time to relax your jaw and really work into all of the places that you hold tension. Those would be some really nice things you could do for yourself. Now, the third type is the hyper-vigilant type. And this is the person who holds tension kind of everywhere, but also in the neck and in the shoulders. But this person really expresses it with hypervigilance. So their tension is the on switch that never gets turned off. And so this is something that I associate with Blue Vervain or Verbena hastata. And you can also use Verbena officinalis. Herbalist and botanist Seven Song says they both can be used pretty interchangeably. In my practice, I prefer to use Verbena hastata, which is the American version. So this plant grows Also, it likes to grow in pastures and along roadsides. It likes to grow where there's movement. And that's, I think, a great example of sort of the niche that it likes and who it works best on, the people that don't slow down, the people that don't stop. And an interesting thing about this plant is that it grows up and it creates these long sort of inflorescences that have a bunch of purple flowers. And what this plant will do is it'll create so many flowers on the top of this very slender stalk that it will actually break the whole top down. And so you'll see these on the roadside where they're actually like, you know, the top of the plant has toppled over from too much weight. And this is a great example of that type of person, right? They hold so many ideas and so many high standards that it actually ends up collapsing them if they're not careful. So Dorothy Hall, an herbalist from Australia, says it's for the workaholic who is uncomfortable when there is nothing to do. So I think that's, you know, again, another good description of this particular type. They're unable to relax. They also, one of the medicines, along with, you know, all three of these herbs are antispasmodic, and that's how they really work on releasing muscular tension, and that's both smooth muscle and also just, you know, other muscles in the body. But an interesting thing about this plant, Blue Vervain, is that it's also an epileptic herb. So it's been used in history as something to help with epilepsy, and particularly epilepsy that starts in the neck and then turns into a seizure. So we can think about that for yourself too, or if you're thinking about this type where the tension starts in the neck, usually along the sides of the neck, and that can lead to a migraine. It can lead to you know, seizures in the case of epilepsy. But if we think of what an epileptic herb or drug might do, is it sort of stops the spasmodic nature of a seizure and of this clenching down. And it's just, I mean, if you've ever seen anyone that's having a seizure, it's just, there's so much tension present in the body. And so with this herb, it just really helps to diffuse that really clenching tension. And it's also a bitter medicine, so it has a slightly cooling effect on the body, and it's also very acrid, so you're going to get that taste kind of like bile in the back of your throat. But what that taste does is it actually helps to, it's part of its antispasmodic action, is that you taste and you go, ugh, and that is a release. So you release, and then your body settles down a little bit out of that state of tension. It sort of shocks you out of tension. This is one that is really a more of a long-term medicine, and Seven Song talks about, you know, really this is one that you usually have to take for a while to see long-term results, but I have had clients in the past use this herb even just a few times and notice a remarkable release in that driving tension and that hypervigilance. So you can, you know, you can definitely play with long-term and try to notice the short-term effects. This one is also great as a tincture. All of these herbs are pretty bitter, so they're not great as teas. I prefer them in tinctures. So you can use Blue Vervain as a tincture and start off again, you know, low dose. With this one, you know, 5 drops. You don't have to go that high. You could go again 15, 20 drops just to kind of see how you like it. You could go higher. So if you're having a lot of tension and you really want that release, you can use higher amounts of this plant. So to me, Blue Vervain teaches us how to point the finger back at ourselves, because one of the patterns with this hypervigilance is that they tend to blame other people for their problems, or they tend to really be hypercritical of other people. And that just is a reflection of how critical they are of themselves. And so when we work with this medicine, it can kind of help us reorient our attention back to ourselves and our own struggles and our own issues, and help us to get more clear about those. So the practice for this, or the ritual for this herb, would be to sit up straight like the plant, hold your head high, and to take an honest look at yourself and what are the things that need to change. And this might be a good list activity as well. So you could use a piece of paper and sit up tall and just make a list of, like, really, let's get clear. What are the things that need need to be worked on, and make a list of those and write as much detail as you can, you know, without being unkind, but being very, very clear and, you know, very concise. And then after you make that long list, then you have to close the book and go for a walk, take a nice warm bubble bath, or just lay down and take a nap, because that's the hardest thing for this type, is to actually let themselves be. So that would be the exercise, and you can do that multiple times. And in the process of actually letting yourself be after you do the download, you'll be amazed at what actually can be worked out in the subtle, sort of in the subtle psychological level of the body and the mind together. You know, when you call attention and then you let go. So those are the 3 plants and the 3 tension types that you can play with and work with. I hope this was interesting. Let me know how you work with these herbs and any suggestions or insights that you've had in working with them. And I thank you so much for watching. Please like this video if you liked it. Please share it if you know anyone that you think might also enjoy it. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye-bye.